First, this week we learnt that our Defence Force has shrunk to its smallest size in 7 years. Let me put that into some kind of perspective for you. We have just over 57,000 men and women in uniform. Guess how many of them actually carry a gun? Less than 6,000. Think about the size of this country and our population of just over 25 million. Now, you won't find better soldiers anywhere else in the world, hands down. The same goes for those brave men and women in the Air Force and the Navy. But they are not miracle workers. Luckily, though, the world is in good shape. So it's highly unlikely we might find ourselves in trouble. Oh, wait. Even before the horrific massacre in Israel and the war in the Middle East, this country's government told us that we are in the most uncertain strategic position in 80 years. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said this in a speech to the Lowy Institute in March last year when he was still opposition leader. Take a look.
Let me be clear. Labor will ensure that Defence has the resources it needs to defend Australia as well as to deter potential aggressors.
So an election promise. Now, we all understand that nothing happens quickly in this space. It takes time. The problem is we've had time and plenty of it between conflicts to build ourselves up. How many governments have failed us over the past 80 years? There are some who believe we, as a nation, have never faced a greater external threat. We should have seen it coming. And when I say we, I don't mean you and I, but those we've elected and charged with keeping us safe, those we've trusted. Cost of living is often referred to as the biggest issue for everyday Australians. Throughout the election, it was Labor's catch cry. They used it to attack the former government. It's now being used to attack them. And for good reason. It matters greatly to people. And they promised, this is Labor, that it would improve under their leadership. But if we are going to be entirely honest with ourselves, and we need to be, there is a threat, an issue far greater. Look around the world. I reckon the people of Ukraine, Israel and Gaza would kill to list cost of living as their number one concern. They have far bigger problems right now. It's actually a privilege, in a weird way, and stay with me, to consider it the biggest problem you are facing. And many of us understandably feel that way because we assume we are safe. We blindly believe that our government is doing all the important stuff behind the scenes to ensure our national security, particularly right now. It's complex and hard to understand sometimes. Governments are often restricted in what they can say when it comes to these kind of threats. And sometimes it's just a handy excuse when they just don't have any answers. Think about broken political promises, huge stuff-ups, failures. How many of those have we seen from politicians over the years? It's hard to count. Is it naive to think they aren't occurring in the national security space? I think so. What if we all genuinely understood the threat currently posed and, more importantly, our ability to confront it? The signs have all been there. In fact, it hasn't even been cryptic when it comes to those who wish to do us harm. When people show you who they are, believe them. The price of bread won't matter much if we are under attack. There's no point stressing over mortgage repayments if our houses are being bombed. You might think this is far-fetched, but how do you reckon Ukraine felt 2 years ago? Israel 2 weeks ago? How do you think the people of Taiwan feel right now? My dad, former Senator and Major General Jim Molan, spent the last 20 years of his life begging government to develop a national security strategy, a plan, to determine the threat posed and how we as a country should and could respond to it. He drove people crazy. He waxed lyrical regarding our pitiful fuel supplies, a matter of days if we are cut off from the rest of the world. He was often laughed at, behind his back to his face, shut down, mocked even. But he never gave up. As cancer ate away at him over those last 18 months, he didn't travel, relax, tick off a bucket list. He wrote a book. It was called Danger on Our Doorstep. For money? Nope. The profits are all donated to charity. He did it to warn us of the significant threat we face and our inability to confront it. He certainly wasn't going to be the beneficiary of any heightened awareness. He knew that. But his love for this country always outweighed self-interest. Alliances are wonderful things, and America is a much-needed partner for us here in Australia. And just as the Prime Minister is doing right now, we need to foster that relationship and invest in it. But even just a casual observer can see that the US is no longer the powerhouse it once was. And even a former American general has joined the ranks of those saying they'd struggle to defend themselves against China, let alone anyone else. We have our nation's elite in the Army, Navy and Air Force. As I said at the start, among, if not the best in the world. I spent this week with 300 of them at the Women in Defence Awards in Canberra. They are superb individuals. Cream of the crop. It made me really proud to be an Australian. But again, they cannot perform miracles. As the PM said before taking office, and I want you to listen to it because it matters so much, just one more time.
Let me be clear. Labor will ensure that Defence has the resources it needs to defend Australia, as well as to deter potential aggressors.
There are some political promises that we cannot afford to have broken, and that's chief amongst them.